One thing you should know about me.
I specialize in a very specific type of security. Subconscious security.
You're talking about dreams?
Chris's films, whilst they are dealing with fantasy subjects, it's trying to put it into a real world that you or I might actually consider that we could visit. We're taking that photorealistic approach to visual effects and then applying it to some truly outrageous imagery. And if anything, it put more emphasis on getting things to look real than we'd ever had before, because when you're seeing something outlandish like Paris folding up into a cube, it's got to look completely convincing in terms of the texture of the buildings and the lighting and the stuff on the streets, the way that people are walking around. Because if there's anything fake looking about it, then immediately people are going to say, oh yeah, well that's just an effect.
A single idea from the human mind can build cities.
Limbo City is a city that you haven't seen before. It's not Gotham City or New York or Chicago just stuck by the sea. It's something completely different. In the script, it described it as being a jumbled collection of modernist buildings which are crumbling into the sea with great chunks breaking off like icebergs carving off a glacier. And Chris was very keen to have this idea of the buildings almost taking on the sort of look of a landform, like a glacier, in fact. And he pointed us in the direction of natural history footage of glaciers in the Antarctic. And then we also looked at different types of architecture, and we settled on this look of early modernism from the early 20th century, which was kind of thematically important to Chris, because the architects working with those kind of ideas, they were looking to design the entire environment in a very sort of utopian, optimistic sort of way, which kind of echoes the dreams that Mal and Cobb are having when they first arrive in Limbo. They see it as this place with these limitless possibilities. But in the end, it becomes a prison. They're trapped in it. So it becomes monstrous and overbearing, and they're trapped in it. And then eventually, when we come back to it, it's decaying. It's falling back into the sea of Cobb's subconscious. We went through a process of concept design where art department and also the designers over at Double Negative, my visual effects company, we sat down and we came up with sketches of how this might look, but we always ended up with things that looked just too fantastical, too science fiction. Cities embedded in glaciers or cities made of ice or something like that. And Chris was keen for us to get something a bit more unique, but which also fitted into the fabric of the film. And so we actually came up with a new piece of software which took a digital model of a glacier, and then filled it up with architectural blocks, and eventually created this sort of this dense, mutating city where close up you see all the individual blocks, but then from a distance it's this undulating, crumbling cliff. And then we added things like the collapsing cityscapes and things like that. In terms of making it look real, we spent a lot of time looking at real-world architecture, looking at library references and going out and photographing buildings. We were taking endless pictures out of our window. Our office here in London looks out on Centrepoint, which is a fantastic piece of mid-century modernist architecture. And the way that the light would shift and change across the building as the day progressed and everything became a fantastic source of reference for the way we get things looking right. So we're always looking for something in the real world that we can relate these fantastic images to.
I think I found a way home. And this last job, that's how I get there.
The dream's collapsing.
What we wanted, though, with the Fortress Hospital collapsing in the snow sequence, is we wanted that sort of brutal chaos of reality, and the miniature gave us all that. We built the thing for real. It's a 6th scale miniature. It's about 40 feet high. It was rigged with hydraulic mechanisms to make it collapse and lots of pyrotechnics to make it blow apart. And you get this sort of unexpected reality to it. Chris often describes real-world physics as being slightly disappointing. And you're kind of looking for that, something, it's a sort of unexpected sort of look. Whereas the digital approach sometimes produces something which is a little bit more contrived, a little bit more preconceived. And it's also true that we wanted it to feel like, a big, glossy action movie at that point. We wanted people to recognise it as a reference to something from films of the past or something. And so there's a combination of all sorts of different techniques there. When you first see the fortress explode, that's the full-size set in Canada being blown apart by Chris Corbold's special effects department. They filled it with dynamite. And then it goes to the wide, and you see the miniature beginning to collapse. And then we extend and enhance that with computer graphics as well.
It's called Inception. I'm ready.